Hello and welcome back. And this is part 2 of our lesson on mixed methods research design. And let's see, I think we left off with the example on slide 13. And so let's start with slide 14. How do you identify sequential exploratory designs? So other terms you might hear are exploratory. They might be focused on instrument development. They might say that it's a sequential design or two-phase design. And basically we're looking for qualitative findings, right, first, and that are going to be generalized or tested with a quantitative component. Okay, slide 15. The characteristics of the sequential exploratory mixed methods design. First of all, qualitative data is leading off this time. Um, and so this happens, like, let's say you're doing theory development, right? And so you want to find out, from an interpretive perspective, what's going on with a phenomenon or a sequence, a process. Um, and then once you found out and you've got your theory, okay, now I'm going to test it using quantitative methods. Okay, the priority is the qualitative component, with the quantitative component being more confirmatory. And yeah, so the qualitative phase builds to the quantitative phase in order to produce quantitative results that test this initial qualitative finding. Okay. The rationales, you need to know more, first of all, and qualitative data is particularly useful when you need to know more about phenomenon that's maybe not well defined or hasn't been extensively studied in the past. And it may be that you don't have, let's say you are looking at and this happens in psychology and counseling, where there may not be an instrument to test something that you have seen in practice, right? There may not actually be the instrument, the survey, the inventory may not actually exist. And so you start or may not exist for the population that you're looking at. So you start out with looking to see what's happening with this population, or what's happening with this phenomena in this population, and use that to develop your instrument. And it allows you to select variables. It gives you hypotheses for testing, and then you design your instrument. Okay. So let's look at an example. This is from Catherine Lutheran University. This was an action research project. And action research projects impact on teacher leadership attitudes and perceptions. Okay, so, and this is by Myers and Dillard. Dillard actually used to teach here at Augusta University, and now she's teaching in Texas. And so the California Reading and Literature Project, in 2010, they began a 2-year longitudinal study to examine the effects of participating in an institute called Reframing Teacher Leadership, an action research study group. Okay, so they had pre-K to 12 teachers in this institute, right? They are participating in this professional development. And basically they wanted to examine the impact of participating in that professional development, and really the impact of the teachers doing some action research. So first they analyzed participants' feedback through surveys and field notes, and it confirmed a claim that action research empowered teachers, right? So there's there's literature out there that says action research empowers the participants, right? And they're looking at specifically a teacher population. Now, you can't tell from the abstract, but if you read the paper, first was the field notes, them, teaching in and participating in this institute, right? So that's what happened first. The teachers are in the institute. I think they were keeping reflections, some kind of log or that kind of thing. And then the survey. Okay, so they started out first. These teachers are in this experience. Let's see what they say about the experience. Then once we have information from that, let's survey all of our teachers and see how this generalizes across the teachers. And basically, they found that action research empowered teachers to have a greater stake in curriculum and instructional decisions and provided them with a framework to improve their pedagogical practices, which is always a good thing, right, teachers? Okay, so let's look at another, our final of the 4 major qualitative research designs. I mean mixed methods research designs. So how do you identify embedded mixed methods designs? Additional terms might be embedded, nested, primary and secondary. The primary research question requires a typical quantitative or qualitative approach, but the secondary question calls for another type of data. Okay, so this is similar to our convergent parallel, except it's very clear that we have a primary and a secondary, something that's inside the primary. Characteristics, timing, and this it could either be the quantitative or the qualitative that are first. And then the primary component answers your major question, right? And then the secondary component answers your lesser question. And the secondary results augment or provide an additional source of information for the primary component. And you might do this sometimes when your first question, although interesting, doesn't feel sufficient to fully describe a phenomenon. Okay, and so you do see this where you have this, this is mostly a qualitative study, but we're just going to add in this small quantitative piece, or this is mostly a quantitative study, but we're just going to add in this qualitative piece to answer this part of the question that we have. Let's see, and the rationales are things that I mentioned. It needs to be enhanced. Your primary question needs to be enhanced. Your primary and secondary questions might be related, but different and actually need different methods. And then this fitting within idea. Okay, so here's an example about sedentary behavior. And this is by Garcia and colleagues. And the title of the paper was Psychosocial and Friend Influences on Objective Sedentary Behavior and Screen Time. So we got 2 outcomes, sedentary behavior and screen time. This was a mixed methods analysis. And so the abstract starts out where the authors point out that sedentary behavior increases throughout adolescence and is associated with adverse health outcomes. And so this embedded research design, they started with the quantitative. They had 108 middle and high school students who wore accelerometers, and some of you probably know exactly what that is. And as I was reading the article, I was like, that seems like what a Fitbit does. Okay, so they're wearing these devices that show how active they are, right? And they also nominated friends to complete this activity questionnaire. So And then after, okay, so we've used this Fitbit-like device to measure these kids, these youth, how sedentary they are, right? And we also did a survey of the youth and their friends, okay? And then we want to understand more, okay? So we're going to do focus groups centered around influences on sedentary behavior. So for the quantitative component, which was their primary, they did regression analysis. And for the qualitative component, they used in vivo software, which is one of the softwares that I mentioned a few lectures ago, that's used for analyzing, and what this would have been transcripts of the focus groups. Okay. They found out that active friends influenced adolescents to engage in less sedentary behavior. So if your friend says, hey, you want to go shoot some hoops? That's going to be different from if your friend says, hey, let's play this game. And they said interventions should place an emphasis on encouraging less screen time and providing opportunities for adolescents and their friends to engage in activities that promote physical activity rather than sedentary behavior. Now, reading through the abstract, it might not be clear how the quantitative results relate to the qualitative results. But if you look at the introduction, they have a sentence, thus, the current study aims to examine friend and psychosocial influences on sedentary behavior and screen time, in addition to exploring these associations by utilizing focus groups. Okay, so we're going to examine these friend and psychosocial influences. That's our primary. And then we have an in addition. Okay, that's how you know it's a embedded mixed methods design. All right. Okay, next slide. Slide 22. Now, transformative mixed methods designs. This is not, well, I said we have 4 major mixed methods designs, and I said and a half, right? Transformative mixed methods designs is more about the intent of the research rather than how the research is designed, okay? So you can do a transformative study that follows any of the 4 major designs, but you're guided by a transformative or social justice theoretical framework, okay? And that's the big difference. That's what defines it, is that you have this transformative or social justice framework that you're working toward. And action research projects often use this design. For example, there was a study that was done by 2 professors here at Augusta University, along with their colleagues. It was led off by Dr. Juan Walker, and also Dr. Andrew Kemp participated as well. And they were looking at pre-service elementary social studies teachers. So these would have been undergraduates in our preparation program for becoming social studies teachers. And they were looking at the extent to which these pre-service teachers utilize critical thinking skills. They gave them insight assessments to analyze, the students' reflections, critical thinking skills, and a dispositions test. And then they developed a survey for after they had gone through experience where they're learning about critical thinking. So initially, and this is common, initially these pre-service teachers believed that their critical thinking skills were above average. However, after taking the skills and dispositions test and receiving feedback on their reflections, they develop a new appreciation and understanding of the components of critical thinking. And they also made a commitment to help their future students develop their critical thinking skills. So often it's a very useful technique to strengthen the skills of the teacher or prospective teacher in a particular area so that they can then enhance those skills in their future students, right? In their future K-12 students. So this study addressed the need to consider how our pre-service teachers think about their practice, how to help them think more critically, and how to help them teach critical thinking skills when they become teachers, right? And so I call this a transformative design. Okay, first of all, you have two levels of transformation here because you're working with teachers. You want to transform the pre-service teachers themselves, right? Because you want to develop their critical thinking skills. You want to help them appreciate the role of critical thinking, right? Because we don't want our teachers to think that, oh, education is just to download information into a kid's head. If they're going to be, active, independent thinkers and citizens, we need them to be able to think critically. Okay, so we're trying to transform the perspective of these pre-service teachers as well as increase their skills in teaching in this area, so that they can then transform the skills of their students, and particularly help their students to be better critical thinkers. Okay, so that's what we have today for mixed methods research. This is going to lead us very nicely into talking more about action research in our next lesson. You all have a good one. All right, bye-bye.